Hello! I have finished leveling my monk to level 90, and in doing so, had to play around with a few of the talents. So, got to do what I'm going to call a bit of theory crafting. When the pre-patch for Midnight came out, Brewmasters at least lost Rising Sun Kick. So that has been my kind of focus on if there was a way to replace that, or it uh, it kind of messed up the rotation. Rising Sun Kick didn't exactly fit with the rotation, but there hasn't been a kind of a suitable replacement. So as I said, I played around with a few of the talents as I was leveling. As far as setting up um, all of the talents, this was a new monk I created in War Within. I have two others, but I wanted to make a new one just for Brewmaster. So kind of set the talents up as I was leveling, and then just kind of reset them up after the pre-patch reset. So first things first, the stat priorities that I have been trying to follow. So, as I said, I just reached level 90, so things aren't exactly where they should be. But the main thing is mastery, first and foremost, because that affects your dodge. Either dodge from an incoming melee attack or dodge with Blackout Kick. And then next to that is haste, which increases your energy regeneration, and as a monk you do use energy. And then I've been just kind of letting critical strike and everything else just kind of fall where it may. If you can get versatility, I would say get versatility because it'll increase damage and healing and decrease damage taken. And of course if you can get leech, had very little leech, but you don't need a lot to make a difference. So, and that seems to be working fine. I mean 16% critical strike is perfectly fine. It starts to the diminishing returns on critical strike, I believe, kick in like around 20% if everything still holds true from when we could reforge. That's usually around the percentage, so I'm not too worried about that. That's 16's a decent amount. There, 7's a bit low for versatility, but as I said, just reached level 90, so was able to had a couple pieces, was able to get two pieces of my um, my 4-piece tier set, so I was happy about that. And yeah, so then next after that, as far as the talents I played with, so I'm going to start with healing first of all, because there's only a couple of those to go over. So one of the things I took later on was Silent Sanctuary, which normally wouldn't have interested me so much because it heals when there's no enemies around. Why would you necessarily need this per se? But healing was a bit of an issue as I was leveling from 80 to 90. So this actually helped quite a bit. And it says when no enemies are within 15 yards, so it doesn't even say you have to be out of combat. So, in some dungeons, I mention that because for some reason, even after you've defeated the trash and you're kind of running in between trash mobs or from the trash to the boss, for some reason it was still showing I was in combat. So, um, I'm assuming this is still taking effect as long as there's no enemies within 15 yards. It's a pretty short distance, all things considered, So that, and then I played around quite a bit with these two. So you have Strength of Spirit, which both of these change how Expel Harm works. So Strength of Spirit increases the healing based on your missing health, which I normally would say is the weaker of the two options. Profound Rebuttal. There we go. Profound Rebuttal. Increases critical healing by 50%. So normally I would say this one was better. But it didn't seem to be. I went back and forth with these a few different times, and it just did not seem to be did not seem to be kind of living up to what it should be. So not entirely sure why. Some of these abilities have, like when it says critical healing, some of them work with your critical strike and some of them don't. There are a few abilities in the game that have like their own like RNG to it for some reason. So I don't know if that's it. I feel like my critical strike's been fairly high for most of the time I've been leveling. So I feel like if this was going to work, it would have worked. But this seems to work perfectly fine. You also, with Expel Harm, have, if you go up here, where was it? Was it here? Let me see here, because there was, you get charges. And I was trying to remember. Your healing, yeah, healing spheres. That's what I thought. Increasing the amount here, yeah. So you have healing spheres, which is not an uncommon thing for monks. They've had those since monk was introduced. They're actually this kind of orange yellow here, like the icon. They're not the actual green, which is a bit confusing because at one point you did have two different ones. You had a yellow one and you had a green one. So I was a bit confused there for a moment. But each one of these does increase the healing of Expel Harm. So if you can get a few charges, I think you can get up to, I think I've had as much as 4. Don't know that there's a limit necessarily, but yeah, usually you get about 2, maybe 3 on average. If you can use that in combination with Strength of Spirit, so basically just reserve Expel Harm for when you actually have charges. That seems to work the best. Like I said, don't know why Profound Rebuttal doesn't work better. I was kind of disappointed with that because usually abilities that have like a critical strike, um, you know, tie in with critical strike somehow usually do better. But yeah, I mean it's still not great. I also have to use Vivify quite a bit after casting Keg Smash. So it was Rising Sun Kick, but they removed Rising Sun Kick, so they just changed it to Keg Smash. Your next Vivify becomes instant cast. So also reduces the energy. So you do have that to occasionally use. I do use that to help keep my health up, help the healer if they seem to be struggling. So those are the main 2 things I played with when it came to healing. As far as damage, as I said, they removed Rising Sun Kick from Brewmastery during the Midnight pre-patch, so that was where I have Chi Burst, and it didn't work great because the cooldown didn't really synergize with the rest of the abilities. So, it was a harder hitting ability. I think it was probably, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was my hardest hitting ability. I was kind of surprised they took it away because that was kind of a signature ability. Blackout Kick, you did the swipe, and then Rising Sun Kick, you did the backwards kind of, um, I guess not backwards, but the front kick. So I was a little bit surprised by that. So I started looking at Chi Burst, which I normally don't care for because it targets only the enemies in front of you. Um, so Chi Wave and Chi Burst have both been monk abilities since they were introduced. I remember playing around with these, and normally I choose Chi Wave because it's a passive that heals and does damage. That was a new thing with monks, that you had abilities that could do both. However, I'm not going to go over exactly every um, specific kind of way I played with these because some talents, there were some on the monk and some on the brewmaster. I tried different combinations of them, and I feel like that's going to get a bit confusing. And quite frankly, I don't remember exactly everything now that I did because I kept going back and forth and back and forth as I was doing world quests and dungeons and all of that. But I really tried Chi Wave to make it work, and with the stat squish that came in Midnight, this just doesn't do enough right now. So I think if you were wanting maybe something a bit more threat focused, and maybe not so much damaged or healing focused, which you do get more of with Chi Burst. I mean, the numbers are much higher. Um, and it does help heal the group. So I mean, there is a benefit. It's not a bad ability. I don't particularly care for the cooldown. The cooldown it kind of doesn't help, but um, fortunately, Blackout Kick is short enough. I kind of use Blackout Kick twice. I kind of use this as the filler, this and Spinning Crane Kick. You have to be careful with Spinning Crane Kick because you can use up your energy pretty quickly. But yeah, with Keg Smash, if you take passive, when you use Keg Smash, the remaining cooldown of Breath of Fire is reset. So if you remember, you can use Breath of Fire, Keg Smash, and then Breath of Fire again. So that helps with the rotation, but not ideal. I would say of the two, Chi Burst, I mean, you do get more of a benefit from it. So um, and then from there, so that was pretty much all for the monk talents. And then for the brewmaster side, um, so I tried messing around with rushing Jade Wind, which used to replace spinning crane kick at least for Mistweavers. I'm not sure about brewmasters. Brewmasters went through a lot of changes when monks were first introduced. Um, But I tried using this because I thought, well, this might have a benefit. It puts a wind around you, and it doesn't have a energy cost, so I won't be using Spinning Crane Kick as often. Um, Kind of the same thing as with Chi Wave and Chi Burst. It comes down to damage, basically. Special Delivery just does more damage. And then there's also a passive you can take for whichever one. So Special Delivery does additional damage. Um, Rushing Jade Wind just increases the radius of the wind around you and causes it to deal fire damage. So I'm not really sure what the point of the fire damage is. The increased radius I kind of get, but the fire damage, not so much. Wasn't really helpful, unfortunately. So yeah, went back to special delivery because that seemed to be working better. And then I came down and looked at pressing the advantage, which replaces Tiger Palm, which at the time seemed like the in the War Within seemed like kind of the way to go because Tiger Palm doesn't do a lot of damage. It's just kind of a filler ability, really. I think it reduces the cost of your brews. So this seemed better. Um, reduces the cost of your brews, blocks your target's chi, doing additional damage. After 10 attacks, the next cast of Tiger Palm at 100% effectiveness, so that seemed a little bit more worthwhile. So I went ahead and took a Blackout combo just to see. And quite simply, the problem is Tiger Palm costs energy, so I was running out of energy too quickly, trying to use it where Chi Burst was. So I had taken Chi Wave, got rid of Chi Burst, taken Chi Wave, and yeah, so Spinning Crane Kick uses energy, Keg Smash uses energy, Expel Harm uses energy, and so did Tiger Palm. So I was just running through energy way too fast. So that was not, and that was not a problem I had in the War Within. So um, that did not last long. So I just went back to press the advantage and just stayed with that, and then just kept coming back over here looking at the healing abilities because healing really was an issue as I was leveling up, especially in dungeons. Um, and then just kind of kept going back and forth because I really wanted to use Chi Wave. I really liked Chi Wave, but it just wasn't. It just wasn't working. So, um, and then lastly, so as I started leveling up, we got some more talent points. We got more talents added to the hero. I think these were like hero talent type things, and then these what were these primal talents? I think is what they were called. Um, so we got to put talents into more things, which was nice. So exploding keg was something they added, changed. I think it works pretty much the same as the ability did in the War Within. Um, does something very similar at the very least. So it has two passives you can take. So fuel on the fire, which summons two tornadoes that swirl around doing fire damage. The problem with this, again, quite simply, is that they do not move with you. They are stationary. So wherever you trigger these, if the enemy moves out of them, and being a tank, you do have to move out of stuff on the floor and all of that. The so the whirls summons a whirl of flame, but it's like two tornadoes. Um, they stay where they are, and the enemies just move out of them. So that's not really helpful. And then empty the cellar allows you to use exploding keg again and deal additional damage and reduce the cooldown of your brews. I kind of like this. I kind of don't. Um, it's a bit weird hitting the same ability twice. So I kind of like this is a on target location ability, so I'm kind of used to using it, hitting my celestial infusion because that will throw a keg in the air. Um, yeah, whenever you use a brew. Yeah, there we go. Drinking from your brews. 100% chance to toss a keg in the air. So um, I get some damage mitigation and damage. So usually use that and then go back to my rotation. So let everything go on cooldown. So it just kind of threw me off a bit. Just didn't really care for how it worked in with everything. And quite frankly, it only worked at thought it was reduced, but it just says it deals physical damage and reduces the cooldown of your brews. It just didn't seem to do a whole lot. Like when I use Exploding Keg itself, you can notice a difference. When I use Smashing Keg, you notice a difference. It just didn't seem to really do a whole lot. So again, I think this might suffer a bit from the stat squish. So instead, I was looking at the new talents they added. I think these are Primal Talents. I think is what they were calling them. I could be wrong. And drinking a brew has a 20% chance to leave you with an empty barrel, which is tossed along with your next keg smash to deal physical damage to your target. Ricochets up to 4 times at 80% effectiveness. So, kind of played with this, kind of went back and forth playing with these passives, and this just seems to work the best. So it transforms your keg smash. It says it's a 20% chance. I would beg to differ with that because you can use both charges of Purifying Brew and both charges of Celestial Infusion in some stickier fights and still not get this to trigger. So, and that's about if each use of a brew is 20%, that's 80% right there. So you would think I shouldn't have to use 5 different brews to get this to trigger. But there have been other abilities that Brewmasters had kind of the same thing. Like it says it's a 20-25% chance, and it doesn't seem to trigger as often as you would think. When it does, it's not terrible. It does a decent amount of damage. I think it does, yeah, pretty close to what Keg Smash does. So, yeah, so I was kind of looking at rank 3 because you get the refreshing drink when you use fortifying brew. But in all actuality, I wasn't exactly sure. When you were leveling up, you were getting 1 point for each talent. So you would get 1 for Monk, and then 1 for your hero, and then 1 for Brewmaster, and then 1 for Monk, and 1 for your hero, and then 1 for Brewmaster, and all that. So I wasn't sure how many I was actually going to get. So I ended up like 1 short. And I was looking at the other talents because you can take, a talent out and move it in here and move them around. You don't have to put these in here. And I could take these out and use them in something else, and that's perfectly fine. I don't really use Fortifying Brew that often. It's really just more of an emergency ability, and the better geared I am, the less likely I am to use it, so I don't really see the point. There was nothing I could see that I could take a talent point out of. A lot of Brewmaster's talents work with stagger and your brews and reducing the cooldown specifically on your brews and things like that. So I'm happy the way everything works. I'm not going to mess that up for an ability that I'm just very rarely ever going to use. That being said, rank 2 did intrigue me because it my understanding of it was gaining an empty barrel resets the cooldown of Keg Smash. It makes its next cast cost 100% less energy, physical damage dealt increased by 20%. So you would think, as I said, when you get when you gain an empty barrel, it transforms Keg Smash, and then when you use it, it reverts back, the cooldown triggers, and it reverts back to Keg Smash. So I thought with rank 2, it would trigger another use of Keg Smash before the cooldown incurred. And from what I can tell, this just doesn't work. It just doesn't do anything at all. It might increase the damage dealt, but it doesn't seem to do anything different than than what Keg Smash was doing before. So um, I tried putting those talents into. I had tried Fuel on the Fire and Empty the Cellar just kind of by themselves. So I tried putting these two talents because there is a rank with these. Um, I tried putting those into these and playing around with those, and it just wasn't. I just didn't care for it all that much. The um, the fire, the tornadoes, just they're still just stationary. It's not any better, and then having to use exploding keg twice, I just didn't still just didn't really care for it all that much. So empty barrel's kind of grown on me a bit. It's just an occasional extra bit of damage, which is kind of nice. But yeah, as far as the rank 2 of this, just does not seem to do anything at all from what I can tell. So kind of left it for the moment just to see if they do like a hot fix or something with this, because they may not realize it's not working correctly. And I keep seeing where there's changes coming to classes and all of that, and the minor patch we got was a bit buggy, to say the least. So just going to kind of leave it for the moment. I was looking at the Black Ox. It has 2 passives that might be worth taking. So increases your mastery. Double this effects while the Black Ox is active. And then you can recast to stomp mightily and knock nearby enemies into the air. So I do use my effigy. So this is like the serpent statue for Mistweavers. It's not the statue. It's not the statue that you can put out and it just spins and pulses threat. This was a newer one they added in, I think a few expansions ago. But it does share with your, while active, 40% of damage delayed by stagger is instead staggered by the Black Ox. So, and is healed for 100% of your purified stagger. So that's typically when I use it, is when I was doing just LFR raids to get either gear or the Hearthstones in the War Within, the last 2 raids, Undermine, and then what was it, the Mega Forge, whatever the last one was. They both had Hearthstones in the last boss, so I was doing those. So on occasion, I would use it for that. So I could see putting talents into that just to make that a bit better, because it does have a 2-minute cooldown. I thought it was 10 minutes. I think at one point it did have a 10-minute cooldown, but 2 minutes isn't terrible, and I don't typically need to use it more than maybe once during a fight. That's about as often as I get to use it. So, yeah. So there you go.